Hello there. We caught you.
Caught me with a beverage.
Caught me. I have a beverage too.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. Here we are to talk about the latest Supreme Court nominee, the Magic Christian. Oh, wait a minute. That's not what we're talking about tonight.
We're talking about the film, The Magic
Movie, The Magic Christian. That's right. I get confused so easily.
So, I'm taking ownership of the fact that this was a film that I recommended we watch. It's been a kind of cult favorite of mine for most of my life. I hadn't seen it probably in about 15 years. And I'm dying to hear what you guys thought of it. And feel free to be as critical as you want, because I have no sense of protection about it. I just have deep affection.
Well, when you brought it up, when you suggested it, I actually remembered very fondly watching pieces of it with you, probably when I was around 12 years old, and laughing my ass off at certain things. So I went into it with all these incredibly fond memories. Tony's, even through the glasses, I can see Tony looking at both of us like, dudes, we got to give background. We got to give context before we start.
You know, I'm freaking out. There are protocols, but I'm happy to,
critical discussion of the movie without going into the background and the pedigree and the history.
Just, in the off chance somebody's watching and they're lost and confused and they need a little help.
Well, I can guarantee you that if somebody is watching this show, they are lost, confused, and they need a little help. Take it away, Heinz.
I sent you an email with the poster of it. I don't know if you want to show it.
Sure.
I don't have any. I didn't rip anything, but I just think the poster says a lot. It really does frame this the right way. We're talking about The Magic Christian from 1969, directed by Joe McGrath, and written by the man who inspired my glasses today, Mr. Terry Southern, an icon, a cult icon whose status is still growing. I think it's safe to say, Terry Southern is still kind of like too hip to be even that well known. Like, he's still kind of underground. It's unbelievable. Anyway, this movie stars Peter Sellers and Ringo Starr, and a lot of other people, including Yul Brynner, Spike Milligan, Graham Chapman, and John Cleese notably appear in it. John Cleese wrote the scenes that he appears in. I didn't know that until this viewing.
He and Graham Chapman, I guess, were brought in for doing a final comedic polish on it after about 12 separate drafts had been written already. Which
I hear Peter Sellers was very competitive with Cleese and cut a lot of his stuff because yes, thought he was funnier than him and was very upset. And actually,
I thought he had brought them in.
He may have, but at the end of the day, he just thought he was too funny and was pissed off.
There's the poster. Man, that's a great poster.
Yeah. So this is based on, for those of you out there who don't know who Terry Southern is, this movie is kind of best explained by explaining who he is. This is based on a novel that he wrote in early 1950s, or I think in the early 50s. Same title. And he became a cult figure on the scene. He was a beloved author of the kind of counterculture movement. And was attached to a lot of the beat guys and the beat poets and Ginsberg and people like that.
Corso? Did he hang out with Corso?
He probably knew Corso. I would imagine he did.
I had with Corso a couple.
And this movie is like I would say it's, the plot is simply about a very rich man, the richest man in the world, played by Peter Sellers, who suddenly, on a whim, adopts a fully grown man who is played by Ringo Starr, who he meets in the park. He's a homeless man that he meets in the park, and he adopts him in the very beginning of the movie. We never really find out why he chooses Ringo, but he feels to have some kind of connection to him. None of this appears in the book, by the way. This is all just the movie. There's no Youngman Grand in the book.
I love that the movie that it doesn't even really like. Even they don't really give a shit about how all that happens.
They don't. They blow right by it.
There's music playing over the whole thing. It's like a montage.
Yeah.
One of the most important relationships in the film is established. They don't give a crap about it at all. He's just walking to the park, and everything is kind of dubbed from a long telephoto lens.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dialogue, and you can't understand a word of it. You can't hear any of it because.
And the next thing you know, he has a son, and it's a grown Ringo who immediately starts calling him dad everywhere.
Right. Yeah. So the plot, such as it is, centers around these two ne'er-do-wells, rich. They've got nothing better to do basically than to follow the business plan, which is to basically mess with people. Is to basically offer them money and see what the price is that each person they run into has for whatever stunt or gag they can kind of come up with that is usually very compromising to the person. For instance, they find Spike Milligan plays a traffic cop who's giving them a ticket, and to get out of the ticket, they offer him something like 1,000 British pounds to eat the ticket in front of them, which he does. So they find everybody's price. And they talk to all kinds of people, business people and famous people, and set a lot of people up. And there's no real plot other than that. The Magic Christian is the name of a boat that they get on as a big cruise liner. It's a very celebrated cruise that everybody's going to take. And they get on that about an hour and 10 minutes into the movie, into an hour and a half movie. And you don't really know what the Magic Christian is almost until then. It's quite something. So anyway, that's the setup. That's what the movie is.
It's complete anarchy. But I love the extent to which it just the overlap of pop culture from that time and the underlying elements of war and atrocities and social struggle and stuff going on, like people playing insane parlor games with Vietnam atrocities being played on the TV in the background. And
Ringo playing the recorder, and Peter Sellers just playing the harp, and then behind them on a screen is war atrocities. Yeah, they're now. What was? Do you remember the first time you saw this? You both? I mean, did you see this when you were kids in the theater?
I think I saw it in the theater when I was like 13 or 14 years old, and I mean one of the reasons as I've gotten older that I have affection for this movie and movies like this is because getting a distance from the age that I was when these came out, I'm just amazed at what I was drawn to as a kid. The fact that this movie and Putney Swope, which came out the same
year,
and would actually make an interesting double bill.
Well, they're very similar. I mean, they're very, very similar in many ways.
Yeah.
It's like how, what would the counterculture heroes do if they suddenly had, infinite funds and power to turn everything on its head? And I was at 13 years of age, I was really drawn to these kinds of comedies. I just loved them, and this was one of those. And the fact that Ringo was in it, at my age then, it was that in and of itself was an attraction because I was such an insane Beatles fan, and a Peter Sellers fan for that matter. But
I remember just laughing hysterically with you when you showed me the pheasant hunting scene, or the duck hunting scene, and laughing at the nothing like a good clean kill, hey Henry? After he's blown the ducks out of the sky with a howitzer.
It's kind of constructed in some ways. I mean, there's a lot of movies that we'll probably mention that it's reminiscent of. because it is in a classification of film. There are films like this movie, but it's very early. It's a very early example of this kind of movie. It's pretty early. But I mean, if movies like the Kentucky Fried Movie as an American example from the 70s, it's the same vein. There's main characters, but there's just vignettes, and oftentimes they include new characters that you've never met. So there's something that feels kind of like it's sketches put together, and some of them are sketches that were put together. Shall I start with these? I mean, I also have a lot of affection for this movie, but I feel like the most essential person involved who needed to be an anarchist wasn't an anarchist, and that was Joseph McGrath, the director. I really wish this movie had been directed by somebody like Richard Lester or somebody with.
Yeah, it's like a film student that watched Richard Lester's movies and wanted, but didn't really know how. Yeah,
and it felt a little bit like an older guy, maybe. I mean, Joe McGrath directed Casino Royale. Like he's kind of British studio guy, and that was a very structured system with very stodgy ways of working. Yeah. And only a couple of years before Kubrick made Dr. Strangelove there, based on Terry Southern's, well, not based on it, but Terry Southern wrote that version of the script. Yeah. And so Kubrick had a lot of trouble with the British crews early on because they were very stuck in how regimented and how they worked, and he wanted to kind of think outside the box. So I felt like the crew and this director was probably maybe little older than the writers and the creators and the actors who were real anarchists, but they seemed to be trying to maintain a kind of control that they didn't really even have to. Yeah. Do you agree with that? I mean,
I didn't feel it necessarily so much as an effort to maintain control as just not having not having the stylistic chops to capture what they had in their midst, because genius people involved.
Yeah, it seemed a little bit like guessing about what the kids are going to like sometimes. Like there was some stuff that was right on and probably very out of the Terry Southern canon, and then stuff that was like, well, we'll just have some transvestites and that's funny. Like, no, why? There was an obsession about kind of like weird cross-dressing, but not in the British tradition. It was like they were trying to find what the kids wanted.
Yeah.
And some of it, now, did all of the jokes work back when you saw it as a kid, or were there, spots that you were bored by?
There weren't individual jokes so much that were working for me as how much of a monument to we're not paying attention to the rules that permeated the film. So, as now I feel like we're so inured to counterculture stuff because so much of it is contained in the culture itself. But back then it really was like to see a movie where you just had no freaking idea what was going to happen next, even if it made no sense. But listen, I'd tune in for an hour just to watch a cross-dressing chanteuse sing to Roman Polanski at a
especially if that chanteuse was Yul Brynner.
It would have to be Yul Brynner. Yeah, that was pretty.
That was startling. There were things that I can't unsee. And that's one of them.
Boy,
that's a sequence that I don't think needed to be in the film, and I will never feel differently. But
it's one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a very different view of this movie.
I love when they early on in the film when they go to see the production of Hamlet and they kind of fight their way to their seats and Act 3 has begun, and Lawrence Harvey comes up to begin the soliloquy and he goes, "To be," and Ringo says, "I've seen it."
I do think that I love Ringo. I'm probably I think he might be my favorite Beatle. I just because it's not just because it's maybe being contrary. I just think he's great. I love his attitude in films. I love his persona in all of his movies. And I love that this feels like this could have been one of his side trips in Hard Day's Night. Like he might have left the set of Hard Day's Night and done this stuff and then come back to be in the band or something,
He went off to go find Grandpa and then just a sideline.
Now, have you read the book?
No.
I started reading it the other day. It's available. Oh, we lost our brother.
Lost Matthew.
It's just us now, man.
Listen, how does he seem to you?
I don't know. I've been worried, frankly. I'm glad we can talk about it.
He just comes and goes, and there's no way to even
can't track him. I feel like sometimes he's not even listening.
He'll be back on in a second.
I hope so.
Oh, I pressed a bad button.
You did.
Back.
We were scared.
We said all kinds of things about you.
Oh, good.
So you turn your head just slightly, we'll be able to see your eyes, or the other direction. Not that far. There you go. Not even that far, but it's like nothing but reflection.
I like it like this.
That's good. Yeah.
So I was reminded of our conversation last week when we were talking about, just because something has inspired a lot of good movies doesn't mean that it's a good movie.
Okay, but if something's inspired a lot of bad movies,
then it's important to talk about. But I do feel the same way in that, I still find it fascinating and worth talking about how inspiring this movie must have been to people afterwards. I mean, there's so many things that I feel like you can see right away. There's a lot of like Clockwork Orange in the beginning of this movie. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of interestingly, Head came out like a year before the Monkees movie. Wasn't that like I think that was in '68. And have you already seen that?
I'm ashamed to say I've never seen Head.
Really?
This comes from somebody that had the poster of Head in his bedroom at that time. That's
very honest of you. The Monkees were a good band, and that movie was a fun movie. Very similar to this is kind of like an American version of this kind of thing.
You can feel the drugs flying around everywhere in this film too. Like it's like you just know that people were like tripping their brains out and stoned out of their mind.
I just wish the director had done some. That's all.
Yeah. There's some great. I love some of the great. There's just some wonderful lines in it. I love, or just the phrase when Peter Sellers is addressing the board of directors on the train, and I love the train reveal. I love
it's fantastic.
I love that they play that whole scene in that boardroom, and then the train comes to a stop. You realize they've been on a train the whole time.
Yeah.
But at one point, Peter Sellers uses the phrase "common Zen savvy."
That was actually cool because that kind of corporate nonsense, like, aphorism stuff, art of war crap, I thought it came in a lot later. So this was like very cutting edge about how modern boardrooms were run by modern hip guys. I mean, I was saying actually when Matthew disappeared, and I still don't know why you left, and I'm concerned. I'm concerned since the news from this morning. Anytime anybody leaves a Zoom call, I get nervous.
I think it's important tonight. We all need to stand up just to demonstrate.
I think it's not too much to ask just to not disappear onto another call and come back.
Okay.
My introduction to that story was a Facebook post that described the news story that described what had happened, and it said that all the callers were involved in an election simulation, And I responded, I just said, election simulation? I thought you said.
Oh, goodness. For anybody who's watching this months or years from now, what we're talking about is the Jeffrey Toobin story that just broke yesterday. And if you don't know what that is,
you can it'll be on Google. It'll be there.
The expression.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just keep on camera. I was talking about we're talking about the book. Thank you. Protocol.
Hand check. Every so often, you just get to call hand check.
So I started reading the book the other day and was fascinated because I'm ashamed that I haven't read all of his stuff. I've read excerpts and essays and stuff, but I mean, he's the kind of writer that I'm embarrassed that I haven't read all of his stuff. He's reminds me of a lot of writers I love. Absurdists.
Didn't he?
What's that?
He wrote Candy.
He wrote Candy, yeah. He co-wrote Candy. And you can really feel him in this movie, I think. There's so many things that are zingers and absurdist things that come from the mind of the writer of Dr. Strangelove. It's just you feel that. But what's so fascinating about the book is that it's not British, and it takes place solidly in the United States in the 50s. So it's a completely different venue and feel to it. It's a little bit more like Vonnegut, I think. Yeah. And he's the kind of guy in the book that I feel like you'd cast, John Huston in the book, that kind of American, businessman, cunning, maybe completely out of his mind.
Yes.
So I just thought it was fascinating to how they transplanted it to London. And I knew it was because Peter Sellers was a big fan of the book and he loved the book. And apparently, I think this was the book that made Kubrick hire Terry Southern to work on Strangelove. Peter Sellers gave it to him before they were working on the movie. They met and Kubrick loved it. And I think that helped them figure out he wanted to make a comedy out of it too.
For a film that is this hand-fistedly directed, and in spite of how much great stuff there is in it, there are times when it's going like, Jesus Christ, like, and that a lot of the fixes and the stuff that's weird in it was stuff that they had to arrive at in the editing room too.
Right.
My feeling was that they just didn't get the footage that they need. For any kind of traditional approach to some of the scenes. It is amazing, like how many geniuses intersect in this movie. Like,
Jeffrey Unsworth.
Paul McCartney writing songs for the film. Ringo involved with it. Badfinger recording that song, and some of the people we've mentioned. Yul Brynner and
Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, Richard Attenborough. Patrick Cargill, who plays the or Cargill, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he played the auction, the leader of the auction.
Yes.
When the finger comes up and pokes him in the nose. But I remember actually meeting him and being around him because he was in Dad's version of Inspector Clouseau.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I love seeing Graham Chapman show up. He was uncredited in it, but
yes, it's interesting how there's things that you can see that what was in the mix with this group in London at the time, like how stuff like Terry Gilliam's work, you can see connection to Brazil and stuff, like with the animated car commercial.
Yeah, the car commercial, totally like Terry Gilliam. Yeah.
I really honestly couldn't get Putney Swope out of my mind, and I we know Bob Downey Sr. and I mean, he's I'm love that man and his work. That I think Putney Swope was like my awakening to this kind of movie at all. You saw this when I saw Magic Christian a lot later, but Putney Swope, I wonder if he read this book and was also inspired. I never asked him that, but it'd be amazing to find out.
The fact that they were both made the same year is amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah, it really is.
And they, not only in terms of the subject matter, but sort of the you know, a little bit of the making it up as you go along, technical aspects of the film.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I felt like, you know, Bob Downey always seems to have always had, because he felt like he was the lead anarchist, like he was the top anarchist there. So he, as a director, he was perfectly tuned to make those movies, not in a way that this director is not. I don't think he knows how to, but I was also really reminded of Wes Anderson, particularly in the setup of the movie. I mean, I would imagine he's a huge fan. I could see this being it's a Wes Anderson story, really. You know, adopting this kid out of nowhere. This, you know,
yeah, there's a little Royal Tenenbaum thing.
Yeah, like Gene Hackman could play that part. Could play a you know, a Mr. Grand.
Another line I loved in the movie was, I think it was also in the boardroom, where one of the executives pitches something, and Peter Sellers says, "You should try that with an American accent." That was an American accent.
Yeah.
Peter Sellers goes, what's going on over there?
I love how he just loses interest. Like something goes wrong with that meeting, but inside his head, and he just kind of turns off on it, and it's everything goes bad, but you don't really know why.
And then starts weeping about his son.
Yeah.
Before he kicks them all off the train.
It gives them a map to get home, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite scene, Matthew, or?
My favorite moment in the whole movie is when Peter Sellers is reading The Wind in the Willows to Ringo Starr in bed and showing him the picture of Badger.
Yeah.
And also that was, I was watching the movie with Mom, and I think suddenly it was like, oh look, they're reading The Wind in the Willows.
What did she think?
For those of you who don't know, our mother has written some children's books similar to Wind in the Willows. So
yes.
I knew that moment would
she connected to the film.
speak to her.
She connected to it. That's great.
I also like Peter Sellers wrapping the bacon around his head for no reason whatsoever. And also, there's an actor in this who I love. Graham Stark has a very small part in this. He is the other waiter. He's the waiter in the scene at the restaurant with the
littler guy.
The little guy
is fantastic.
Who also appears in a lot of the Clouseau movies.
Yes.
But he also has one of my favorite scenes ever in the movie Victor Victoria, where he plays a disgruntled waiter who's being mistreated by Robert Preston and Julie Andrews, and it's similar. And he's just got that British disgruntled face.
He's
downtrodden waiter, and he's spectacular.
He's really fantastic.
I was also fascinated through the whole movie. I mean, it's a movie about shattering icons and about capitalism being bad, and what kind of, literally by the end, what kind of shit will you eat for money? But some of the racial stuff and the way the disparity between some of the racial taboos that they were in a progressive way trying to break and do something good, and then the horrible language and references they use when they're talking about the weed and I mean, it's pretty extraordinary.
It is. And my feeling about that, not, I got to read the whole book, and I'd love to read iterations of the screenplay. Like, honestly, that would be a great project to read various versions of this script. But I feel like Terry Southern is the kind of person that has, and Laura Bush has a question. Did Badfinger have any part in this? Badfinger just sang the song, right?
They sang a couple of the songs.
Yeah.
But I forget where I was going with that. I totally got sidetracked by Badfinger.
We were talking about the racial stuff. And
that Terry Southern, I feel like if Terry Southern had the kind of control over it that maybe he'd like to have had, that kind of humor would have worked in like we would have always been able to track maybe the irony that he was using. But here it was such a mess that they were doing things that, like, they were trying to be, you could see them trying to be open-minded and trying to do something, kind of hip and with it. And then they'd do something that was just, it would kind of tank what they had just done.
I also loved the first multiracial head transplant.
Yeah.
Which seemed to me to be the prequel to Best Friends Swapping Heads, the wonderful movie that you did years later.
With Greg Benson, yes.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about that, but it's interesting that a film that was so iconic for me would pay for mine. I love the news report about the dog show.
Yeah.
The guy from Africa brings his dog.
It's
actually like a lion, yeah. Jaguar.
Do either of you have a favorite line? Because I have a favorite line in the whole movie.
I do. I have a few things. I can't decide my favorite. My personal, the interchange that kills me probably most is the nipple exchange. Is when he says, "Do you believe that words have a?" I forget how he sets it up. Corruptive influence on people.
Yeah.
And Peter Sellers says, "I don't know," and he turns to his aunt and he goes, "Nipple," and he gets no discernible. No discernible physical change. I just thought that was incredible. And then Cleese has a line that my personal favorite sequence, I think, is the auction sequence. I think that is one of the better constructed parts of the movie somehow. And I think Cleese is
Python.
Very Python.
Yeah.
You can feel Cleese's influence on the writing, and Cleese is really funny in it. Holding his own with Peter Sellers. I mean, he must have been nervous. He's a very young guy. Working with Peter Sellers must have been quite a day for him, actually. But he's hysterical in it. And he has a line where at first he's very snobby and he doesn't think that Peter Sellers has money and he's not going to talk to him. And then Peter Sellers says, "Well, I'm going to supersede all of these offers at Sotheby's and say £30,000 for this piece of work." And Cleese chokes and he realizes he's talking to a billionaire and he gets very obsequious. And Peter Sellers keeps calling this Rembrandt this French painting by these French people. And Cleese has a line where he goes, he's trying to be very polite about it. And he says, "Well, Rembrandt was in a sense Dutch."
I love the line actually in that news report about the Jaguar being smuggled into the dog show. But the newscaster says that a new breed of dog made a spectacularly unfortunate debut.
Yeah,
my favorite line was in the boxing match when he says the announcer says the crowd seems to be sickened by the sight of no blood.
I have that down too. I felt like that line really typifies this movie in a lot of ways. That line really does kind of like solidify what it's about. It's for all its flaws, man. I mean, here we are laughing, like just reliving. It's so relivable, these moments in it. There are just so many pricelessly funny bits.
Well, what's interesting is that, I have these memories of watching it with you, Adam. I think I must have been 14 or 15. It came out on a videotape, and you said, you got to watch this. And I didn't watch the whole thing, but I remember these. I remember the boxing match. I remember the shooting the ducks out of the sky, and a couple of other little things that I remember. And then watching it last night, I sort of sat there watching the movie, kind of like, and then almost as soon as it was over, I started enjoying it. If that makes any sense. Like watching it, I was mystified. I could see these bits that were funny, but I was mystified about what this whole dish was that I was being served.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to understand it as a cohesive dish, and I didn't. And then the minute it was over, I just started remembering each little bite, and every little bite of it cracks me up. And I think that's what you're talking about with the director, that he didn't know how to turn it into a cohesive dish.
Yeah, that's
Hand check. Okay.
I definitely feel like I think it's a prime example of a director's contribution to something. Like if you see, I'm trying to think of him, like what is this exactly like? I mean, is it most like Putney Swope? Is it most like
Putney Swope and Greaser's Palace? And
it's like Putney Swope meets The Party almost.
Yeah, with a little mash thrown in, like a little bit, with that kind of, the gruesomeness thrown in, the kind of really heavy political statements with the violence that they were showing in the real footage.
And A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah. All of those movies, you can feel like a real directorial vision and hand behind it, even if it's a kind of a crazy drugged out vibe that you get from it. And this one seemed like he was treading water a little bit with just how to make this movie.
It's part of, weirdly enough, it's like it's part of what I have affection for the movie for is some of the ineptness in it, because with the passage of time, it's just like they got all these unbelievably great people together and spent a fortune of money and a crew and devoted, a year of their lives to do this thing. It's just a big, stinky, ridiculous, but very funny mess.
Yeah, truly.
Some of Raquel Welch's best work in this film.
Wow. That's a sequence that doesn't make the grade today. It's not really going to be in the new remake of this movie.
You don't think?
I don't think so. I also think that, it reaches for moments too. Like, I think one of the things I feel like disappointed in the director on this one. And I'm totally with you, Adam. Like, I love the mess of it. And there's certain movies I love because they're a mess, and it's like, it doesn't totally work, but that's kind of the magic of it sometimes. But I feel like he almost pulled it together near the end, where they have the big vat of manure and horse urine and blood that they put the money in, right? Yeah. Which is the first chapter in the Terry Southern book, by the way. Really? Yeah, that's something that the main character does as a young man. That's one of the first things he does as a stunt in the 30s. And so this is the end of this movie, but I felt like that was a powerful, that was really powerful. That was really disgusting and kind of like the kind of punchy counterculture imagery and thing that you'd see in a film that really hurts, but is really funny and caustic at the same time. And I feel like he could have made this movie into one of the best movies of the 60s, like ever. And that not being able to quite do it makes me sad, because I think as it is, it's a great cult crazy mess of a movie, where it actually could have been, up there with iconic stuff like if it had a sure hand on it. But again, like part of the joy of it is, I know I have movies like that where the fact that they're a mess is kind of what I love about them, and their shagginess kind of makes them work, Yeah.
We haven't mentioned Christopher Lee yet. Also,
what day was that? Would the producer was like, we got to get more happening on the boat. There's not enough happening.
Yeah.
And they were like, Christopher Lee's at Sheffield Studios today. Let's just see if does somebody know him. Peter, can you talk to him? I mean, even I was actually sad for Christopher Lee in that because even he, I think, deserved more respect than just to be Mr. Dracula, Mr. Vampire for 2 shots. Maybe
that was his decision, though.
Maybe he didn't want to have anything to do with it. Maybe, yeah.
I'll give you 2 setups, and then I've got to be back on my other show.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Sellers, I saw some interviews with him. We watched some stuff, kind of later interviews around the time he did Being There, which was near the end of his life, I guess. What an odd fellow, man. What an odd, not what you'd expect really from him.
Did you
knowing his work?
Cabot interview that he did?
I've never seen that interview.
It's a great interview, and Cabot gets him to do a variety of accents, and he's interesting because he had such a kind of refined affect personally to himself that you almost are like slightly uncomfortable when someone's saying to him, like, do a Cockney accent, do this, do that. You say, like, you don't talk to an English gentleman like that. But then the minute anybody asks him to do it, his eyes light up and he just riff.
Yeah.
Do you know that my first wife, Linda, worked with Peter Sellers in a series of TWA commercials?
That sounds familiar, but I think I did know this. Wow.
And
did she?
She was an actress then, and was a yoga teacher, or just getting into becoming a yoga teacher at that point. And Peter Sellers was a yoga aficionado. He I think attributed it to helping save his life after he had a heart attack, and so it became the basis of a bunch of conversations between the two of them. And Linda actually said that he was sort of hitting on her a little bit.
Right.
But she was playing a flight attendant on the plane in a series of TWA commercials where he played people of different nationalities, an Italian filmmaker and so she actually ended up spending quite a bit of time with him. And if you want to see those commercials, they're actually on YouTube.
Oh, really? Oh, I'd love to see those.
And you'll see in some of them, you'll see Linda in there. She's
how cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't know these were available anywhere. Did she say, other than him being a bit lechy, what he was like?
She didn't even describe him as all that lechy. I mean, he wasn't creepy about it.
Oh, okay.
Like sort of expressing his interest. But she actually said that he was charming, but odd.
Yeah.
That it was hard to know who the real person under there really was. Everything was a little bit of a layered affect.
Yeah, I've heard that about him. I've heard that he was kind of didn't know really who he was unless he was playing a character. Yeah. And then he was very comfortable, but outside that didn't really. He was apparently a big loner, like didn't hang out with anybody.
Sort of a Michael Myers kind of vibe too.
Yeah,
like hanging out with Mike. You're like, where's Mike?
Who is this guy? Like I don't get to know him at all.
Yeah, where's Mike? Yeah,
being there probably appealed to him for personal reasons as well.
Yeah. I would think. It's weird because like it's a hard movie to talk about, kind of, because it's like all the things that you want to talk about are stuff that you kind of just like let's show this clip and here's this line and that
Well, we don't have to talk about it. Nobody's paying us, so we can do whatever we can talk about other things if we feel like it.
Okay, I wasn't suggesting that, but I'm open.
Jeffrey Toobin.
Yeah, Jack.
Oh, it's so embarrassing. It's so bad.
Dear. Oh boy. But on the other side, there's Giuliani and a 15-year-old girl. So, what do you?
I'm interested to see that new Borat movie.
I haven't heard about this.
Oh, really?
This the preview of the new Borat movie. A little clip got released of. They have this 15-year-old girl interviewing Giuliani, and at the end of the interview, she flirts. Apparently, I haven't seen it, but apparently she flirts with him and gets him to come back to her hotel room.
Oh, God Almighty!
And he lies down on the bed and puts one of his hands down his pants. Now he's claiming that he was tucking in his shirt because it got messed up when
you lie down on the bed.
No,
that's what happens.
Something to do with taking the mic off or whatever. Well, he had to reach way down there to get the shirt adjusted.
He was just adjusting his left harness.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's good times. Good times are coming.
Oh, Lord. Well, that's one other thing I will say about this movie is that seeing, what it was skewering, and there's a little montage at one point of what's on the news, and it's just one demonstration being cracked down on, and heads being cracked open, and water cannons being used on people, and protests of the Vietnam War, and the Viet Cong suspect having his brains blown out.
And homophobia in the culture and all kinds of stuff. They were addressing a lot of issues.
And it's just like, that was 1969. It was like 60 years ago. No, that's not true. It was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And what the fuck has changed? It's just like, it's all just the same.
Not enough.
Yeah.
Even Ringo has not changed at all, really.
True.
He's very, very similar to what he was then.
I like Ringo.
I love Ringo. Honestly, like Ringo, without irony, like I genuinely enjoy his work in movies. Like I think I love him in Hard Day's Night. Ringo's Sojourn, and that's a big movie for me. I like Hard Day's Night I've worshipped that movie, and Richard Lester is an unsung. I mean, Soderbergh's definitely tried to hook that guy up, but he needs more love because he did a lot of stuff that didn't get.
Screened Robin and Marion for Michelle. She had never seen it.
Wow, that's a
wonderful Lester movie.
It's incredible. I mean, the Three Musketeers films are great, but if all he did was Hard Day's Night, you could kind of mic drop on that and be like, yeah, I changed cinema history forever. Good night. See you later. Yeah. And he'd never made a film before. He'd been an advertising guy before that.
He basically created the music video.
Yeah. Too. Yes. All of that. Just incredible. And was part of it. Like you could tell his taste was, as much a part of that as the Beatles were, or whoever, was calling the shots from the record company.
Do you remember the interview I did with you as D'Artagnan in the
Yes.
years? Yeah.
I do remember the mozzarella sword. I remember many elements from that. And I remember
one of my favorite moments is when I asked you if how you felt about working with Raquel Welch.
Yes.
And you were so young that you were trying to wing it. You said like, I really liked him, and I said, no. It's not a him. It's Raquel Welch. It's the woman and you just hear me say, the one with and you're like, oh yes.
Yes. Well, I was
You were
I was
fine.
young. I was like 17 years old. I didn't know a lot.
It's a mozzarella sword.
Well.
So, Magic Christian, Beatles, Ringo. Were you a Beatles fan, Matthew? Or were you a Beatles fan because Adam was a Beatles fan?
No, I like the Beatles.
So
Big
you're
fan.
not a Beatles fan. That's the way that a Beatles fan doesn't answer that question. Yeah, I'm a Beatles fan. What do you mean? Music? The Beatles rock band? Yeah, I like them.
Yeah, the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five. I'm really into that whole scene.
I just didn't know. I mean,
This conversation is over. What about the cow sills? You left out the cow sills.
Electric Prunes, man.
Yeah, there you go. Now, James Taylor wrote the soundtrack to my life more than the Beatles did.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. The Beatles are great. Beatles they were a good band.
Good songs.
I love the two Beatles songs in this movie. They were great. They were a couple of the best Beatles songs I've ever heard in this movie. I did always think these were Beatles songs.
Well, they kind of are. They're just performed by other people, but it's like a Beatles cover song.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, literally, I would be like, "Oh, this the Beatles is on the radio," when everybody else would be like, "No, that's a different band completely."
Well, that's what I thought. The same thing. There was a Dave Clark Five song that I, my whole life till about 6 years ago, thought was the Beatles.
Which one?
Where the Dave
I Love You. Give me one kiss and I'll be happy.
That's the Beatles,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Dave Clark Five.
I was always a bit more of a Kinks fan, I think, myself.
Uh-huh.
Not that anybody asked or cares.
Which song?
Which songs of the Kinks?
Now you have to sing them for us. I said
No.
Sing the Dave Clark Five.
I think I'm a Kinks fan because I Ray Davies is the only like guy from that universe I ever met. I met him and he was super cool, and he was drinking alone at a bar that I used to frequent on the Upper West Side. And
you never went to a bar on the Upper East Side.
Yes, I did. I lived on the Upper East Side, so I trust me went to bars on the Upper East Side. And Ray Davies was it was a friend of mine's was having a birthday that night. And we were all a bunch of us were having some drinks, and my friend Don Lanetta was there. Don, Sam Hollander. I think it was Sam's birthday, and Don went over to Ray Davies at the bar and said, "Mr. Davies, I love you. You're amazing. My friend's having a birthday. Would you?" And he came over and he said hello, and he was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he talked to people for a second. He was totally like a normal, just a regular beer guy having a beer.
I love that story.
He was great.
Well, here's to Ray Davies.
He's not in this movie. He would have been good in this.
He could have been in the riot scene on the boat, and we'd never know.
Would not have had a clue. I like that it was a pretty good John Lennon pseudo cameo there. That looked like him.
John Lennon, and then they also have the Jackie O lookalike getting onto the boat. They have a couple of lookalikes getting on the boat.
John Lennon was scheduled to do it, in fact, but he there was a scheduling problem, and he wasn't able to. But he was gonna do it. Yeah.
Wilfrid Hyde-White as the captain is wonderful.
Oh my God.
He's great. Yeah. Oh yeah, fantastic.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say he was in on it. Like even one of the older guys in it was like totally hip to what was going on.
Yeah. I that's the other thing I love about the film is these old veterans who You know, it's like it wasn't that big a leap from, you know, how smashed they all were on stage, you know, in the West End to like, since you're fucking yourself up this way and acting, why don't you come over and do this movie with us?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Exactly. Yes.
That was my call.
Yes. Hallucinating on stage. I've done it for 30 years.
One of the things about Ringo I always felt it was that he was the only one of the Beatles that always seemed to be walking around with a little sense of how lucky he was.
Totally.
And
Exactly.
he's never lost that. He's always seemed to have profound
Yeah.
gratitude for being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Because after all, like Paul McCartney, someone in an interview with, I think it was McCartney, it may have been Lennon, but they were asked, interviewing him, and they said, you know, do you feel that Ringo Starr is the best drummer in rock and roll? And the answer was, Ringo Starr isn't even the best drummer in the Beatles.
Yeah, I've heard this argument for so many years, and there's different drummers that come to bat for Ringo though, and are like, dude, no, I mean, you can't mess with him.
He was a genius, and he had a feel unlike any other drummer that's ever lived. I bow at his feet. But
I agree.
I do love the anecdotes about him.
It's
Speaking of good insults too, Lawrence Harvey,
who plays the Hamlet in this?
Plays Hamlet, has one of the best bad review lines ever. Where, do you know this one? Where he was a critic referred to Lawrence Harvey. They said, Lawrence Harvey is the 7th greatest living actor of Lithuanian extraction.
Lawrence Harvey, who was, other than Manchurian Candidate, I'm having trouble figuring out what movies I've seen him in.
Hey, wait, we have a serious question. What were the cultural effects of these types of black comedy on culture as we experienced it, intended or not?
Well, it's sort of what we've been talking about. I mean, I don't know what kind of effect it had on a societal level, but it kind of, for me, it just defined a sort of anti-establishment, revolutionary attitude and anarchy at a time when those qualities were suddenly becoming much more accepted and mainstream in American culture.
Yeah, I mean, I can't.
I wish I put that down.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to relate to it, I guess, in a way, in a time where we have, you know, access to all kinds of counterculture stuff at our fingertips online. Back, you know, when we were growing up, it took a movie coming out for people to go, oh, I recognize that, and you'd find like-minded people around a film. I think it had more impact then because there was less, you know, counterculture stuff that was actually being put out there for everybody to see. And it may have been, you know, harder to come by some of the written material that, you know, the intelligentsia was all agreeing about. But when it came to like pop culture, to have these movies that were truly subversive, you know, say what you will about them, that truly represented subverting the status quo and what we'd call the patriarchy today, even though there's plenty of patriarchy, I guess, in this movie. But I just think because there was less stuff like it when it happened, it was more important. It felt more galvanizing, I would imagine, you know.
I can also say that as a 13-year-old, when this came out and seeing it, that, you know, I had already grown up in a world where at 13 I had seen, you know, I had seen Kennedy, you know, or lived through Kennedy being assassinated, Bobby Kennedy being assassinated, Martin Luther King being assassinated, the marches in Selma, you know, growing up in California and New York at that age, and this feeling that what you saw in popular culture was not in any way reflecting the underlying insanity and hypocrisy of what was going on, the power struggles at that time, and films like this, as silly and innocuous as they seem on one level, did a lot to sort of make you feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. There are other people that are seeing how nuts.
Yeah.
And in 1967, for half of that year, I lived with a stepfather who was very much in line, almost in terms of personality and in a value system, for everything that Peter Sellers and Ringo Starr are standing for in this movie, of like question, that time of living with Franklin was very much, he was on board with everything that this movie was about. And
that burned it down.
Yeah. And so I think you and I, Adam, having a dad in the arts at that time, and we were around and exposed to a lot more people who would think about and say these kinds of things than most people in the country at the time.
Yeah.
Do you know, this is another movie that came out around the same time, English film. You know the movie If?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The taking over the high school.
Yeah. Lindsay Anderson's movie.
Yeah.
This came out a year before. So, I mean, talk about a subversive movie. That's that's pretty subversive. That's like, you couldn't make that movie today. Literally. You couldn't do that.
His other film, Lucky Man, was a hugely influential movie.
Oh, Lucky Man. Yeah.
Oh, Lucky Man. Yeah.
Yeah. And Britannia Hospital as well. I mean, but he was also like This Sporting Life. He was a great director. But it's interesting how, this stuff was in the air at that time, and I'm actually surprised that If it came before Magic Christian. It's just it's got a similar level of anarchy, but I'm not sure hand on it.
It was more threatening, that movie, as I recall.
Yeah, it's not really a comedy, actually. Yeah.
It is extraordinary to me, though, that it's the same cinematographer as 2001.
Isn't that crazy? Jeffrey Unsworth.
The only place I can see any similarity is between the apes and the ape on the ship. That's the only place I see any similarity between the two movies.
Yeah, it's amazing that he did. I mean, he made some great stuff. Unsworth also did. What else did he do? Cabaret, which is a beautifully shot movie. Zardoz.
Another indication that the director just didn't really have a handle on stuff.
Yeah, because this movie looks like it was shot on a Super 8 camera. Yeah. It looked like it was shot, when you and I were making that movie. Do you remember that movie? Yeah. 1967 in London with the yeah. It's got the same quality as that.
Yeah, it's amazing that the same guy. But I guess that just shows you kind of like how much Kubrick shot 2001 a little bit, because his other movies look more like this than they looked like 2001. Jeffrey Unsworth, great DP. Zardoz is no slouch of a movie as in terms of the cinematography. It's a bit of a slouch of a movie in terms of everything else.
I thought Zardoz were those candies that exploded in your mouth.
Those are Zots, Matthew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hand check, Nick.
Just one, sorry. No.
Well, boys, have we talked about the Magic?
I think we've talked about the Magic Christian as much as it can be talked about.
Yeah, I got nothing smart to say about it other than I do have a lot of affection for this movie. I will see this movie again. I will over the years see it Probably several more times.
Well, next week we will have our Halloween episode. And
That's right.
We'll be talking about The Howling.
We will indeed.
The Howling with the wonderful D. Wallace Stone.
Directed by the great Joe Dante.
There we go.
Hey, in honor of Halloween, do you want to see a magic trick?
Yeah, sure. Here, yeah.
All right, here.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Thank you.
That's pretty good.
Wow.
I don't know how you do split screen. Do you have I don't know how you do that.
I have a team of guys up in the corner with pulleys and
You just
monofilament.
You're always experimenting and tinkering with movie stuff around the house. I love that. You're just building cameras and have teams of people working on shots and stuff. It's so cool. Hand check.
All right. Well, so next week, The Howling.
The Howling.
Monday night on Creative Conversations at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. I'm interviewing my very good friend, author Heidi Mastrogiovanni, author of the Lala Pettibone series.
Could you say her name? I just need to hear that name again clearly.
Heidi Mastrogiovanni.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She's the author of the Lala Pettibone series. Lala Pettibones Act 2 is the first in that series, and we'll be talking about that on Monday night. So please come back and join us and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, so you get notifications of our upcoming live streams, and come back next Wednesday to talk about The Howling.
What if we have shows that we want to talk about that we're doing after the show? No, I don't have any, but like if we did, we could talk about it. Right?
You can talk about everything you're doing.
Okay.
Talk about what you're doing, Adam. What are you doing? What are you cooking? What are you?
It's premature.
Okay.
I don't want to jinx anything.
All right.
But it involves,
But Tony, you have something that just like went up, that won an award somewhere, right? Or went into a festival?
I didn't win it. We didn't win an award yet. Operative word. But no, I'm involved in it. I'm in a short film and edited this film that I made with a couple of my dear friends, Jacob Aware and Trish Harnett. We made a short film called You Wouldn't Understand.
Can it be seen online?
Not right now. It's in the festival circuit, but it's gotten into like 10 festivals. It's been really fortunate. It's had a really nice little run, and soon
your brothers see it. Can your brothers see it? Even though it's
my brothers can see it. My brothers,
can see it.
So there'll be some kind of a private handshake link that we can set up with the brothers. If they, we'll talk about that.
Private handshake.
But it's 2 hands. But it's but yeah, it's getting into a bunch of festivals, and we're excited about that. So
that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to roll the end credits, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Yes, you will.
All right.
Bye.